Hi there. Okay, so we're on to section 2 of the first year, cell structure, and we're going to be having a look at animal and plant cells.
Okay, so in this video, we're going to be discussing the different structures found within plant and animal cells, whereas we talked about kind of what they did in the last one. This time we're actually going to look at them in a bit more detail and see what they look like. And by the end of this video, you should be able to state the different features found in animal and plant cells. So actually being able to look at the cells and say, this is this organelle, based on the ones that you've learned about in the last video.
Okay, so you might want to pause the video here and try yourself a little test. How many of these cell structures can you actually name? So it should be stuff that you know from S1-2. You should be able to look at a picture of a cell and say, there's the nucleus, there's the cell wall. So you could pause just now, otherwise we'll just run into the answers. Okay, so looking at the animal cell on the left, what we've got is the cytoplasm is pointing basically at nothing. It appears to be pointing at nothing inside the cell. So you're looking at not one particular organelle, just the background, and you can see that on both the plant and the animal cell. So the animal cell on the left, plant cell on the right, which you can't see because we're in the way. Okay, nucleus is your second structure, number 2, and then your cell membrane runs around the outside of the cell. And then you've got additional structures in the plant cell, looking at the cell wall, which is running around the very, very outside of the plant cell, and then vacuole, which is that big thing in the middle, and then the chloroplast, which is these green things located there. So we're going to have a look at this in a little bit more detail and just some points that you might come across as National 5.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to discuss is this phrase cell ultrastructure. So in our last video, we talked about the different organelles that are in it. Sometimes this is referred to as the cell ultrastructure. If we're talking about the cell ultrastructure, we're really looking at the cell and looking at all the different organelles inside it. It's just a term that's kind of used to discuss these different organelles. So it's just one to be aware of. They like to use it in exam language, and it's the idea, all the different organelles that you can see under a microscope, that's your cell ultrastructure. They make that up.
Okay, now let's have a look at the animal cell first. So what we have in front of us is a typical drawing of an animal cell. I've just hauled it off an SQA paper there. Now, animal cells will look in different formats. We'll have a look at that in a second, but what we'll look at is identifying the main structures first. So first of all, starting again with this line here is pointing at nothing. That is the cytoplasm. Okay, so cytoplasm, remember, that's the site of chemical reactions. If they ask you what's the job of the cytoplasm, that's what you say. The cell membrane running around the outside of the animal cell there, again, that function is to control entry and exit of materials to the cell. The nucleus is that big thing in the middle. Okay, now it can sometimes appear a little bit smaller than that, sometimes a little bit larger, but what you're looking for is a perfect circle somewhere within the cell, and that contains the DNA and controls the cell. Now, the ribosomes, this is an important part. The ribosomes are not the big waggly lines that you can see coming off the nucleus. The ribosomes are the tiny little full stops that are attached to them. So you see those tiny little dots, those tiny little things, you can see them scattered throughout the cell as well. Those are ribosomes. Now, it's something that tends to throw off quite a lot of people because they see, sometimes they label the little dot there as a ribosome, and then there's something else attached on here and you get a bit confused about, I don't know what this big waggly structure is. They're pointing at the little dots. Those are the ribosomes, and those are sites of protein synthesis. You've got the mitochondria there. I describe it as the waggly jelly bean type thing. So you're looking for something that's round shaped like that, that's got little waggles going back and forth inside of it. That is very typical of your mitochondria, and that's the site of aerobic respiration. You have to make sure you include that. So those are where you'd see your animal cell structures. We're just going to have a look at a couple of other kind of ways that animal cells can appear. So you can see on the left and the right a two-dimensional and a three-dimensional version of a cell, so they can appear like this as well. That would be the nucleus in the middle there. You've got your wiggly jelly beans, so there's your mitochondria. Ribosomes are the little dots, but these are from old SQA papers, okay? So they can also appear like this. So you've got your more complex diagram before, but this is also like a bit of a harder one, okay? Sorry, more simple, not harder. More simple diagram. And again, we see these things in common. Cell membrane runs around the outside, cytoplasm's in the middle, and the nucleus is there. So yes, we're missing the mitochondria and the ribosome, but it's still an animal cell diagram. I know, because it's got that kind of loose shape around the outside, no cell wall, and it's got these features that I recognize to be animal cell features. Okay, similarly, under the microscope, that's what you can see.
Okay, so plant cell, again, this is your stereotypical plant cell diagram. This was taken out of a past paper as well. You can see there's a bit more to it than an animal cell, which you should know now because, as you've already learned from the S1 and S2 bit, there are more things in a plant cell than an animal cell. And that's one big way to tell the difference. You'll also notice that there's a bit more of a structure to this shape. It's a bit more kind of rectangular, whereas the animal cells were a bit more blobby in shape. There is a reason for this, which I'll discuss as we go through the features. So first of all, we have the ribosomes, exactly like in the animal cell. There's the little dots just floating about. There's also the small dots on the big waggly bit as well. These are all ribosomes. Doesn't matter what it's pointing to. Little black dot is a ribosome. We then have the mitochondria. Again, it's that weird waggly jelly bean shape. They always look like this. This is stereotypical of what it looks like. Still the site of aerobic respiration. Not any different. Cell membrane, again, same as in an animal cell, but this time it's not the very outside line, it's that second line in, which is really important that you know in a plant cell, is plant cells have two lines around the outside. So the inner one, cell membrane, it's still doing that job of controlling entry and exit of substances into the cell. We've then got the cytoplasm, so again, same as an animal cell still, just the background, it's the site of your chemical reactions. Okay, and the final one that's the same as the animal cell is this one here, the nucleus. Again, it's this kind of round shape. It does have a little black dot in the middle. This is your nucleus. This is where that DNA is held and where all cell activity is controlled. Okay, now on to the ones that are more than an animal cell. So the first 5, same in animal and plant cell. These last ones are not in animal cells. They are in some of the other cells we'll talk about, but for just now, plant cells, that very outside line, that is your cell wall. That is that thing that is made up of cellulose, and it is a thing that provides shape and structure. So that is why a plant cell appears in that kind of more rectangular shape. It's got structure to it because it has a cell wall which gives it that shape. We've then got the chloroplast. Again, they look a bit weird, but they do always look pretty consistently like this. If you've got a coloured textbook, they usually appear green, but your exam is black and white, so they will appear like this. They've almost kind of got a couple of little stacks of things in it. But you'll look more at these when we do photosynthesis, because the chloroplast is all about photosynthesis and producing sugar or glucose.
Oh, a wee question that crops up about chloroplasts is you're supposed to know that they're green. This is annoying because, yeah, again, your exam paper will be in black and white, but you need to know that chloroplasts are coloured green, just for general knowledge, because there's exam questions that might be, how do you know this cell came from a green part of the cell, or sorry, a green part of the plant? And the idea is if they've got a chloroplast there, that's the green stuff that's making them green.
Okay. And the final bit, this big kind of circle in the middle, this is the vacuole. So this can appear different. Sometimes it appears really small, sometimes it appears quite big, but it will always be in the middle of the plant cell, and it will just look like a big hole in the middle of it. We're going to look much more at this in the next key area that we look at, how the vacuole changes. We're going to touch on that a bit more. Okay, so again, here's different images, different ways plant cells can look. These are 2 3D ones. Obviously, these are your more complex ones, but you can still see a lot of the similar features. You can see the kind of big green oval shapes are your chloroplast. Your mitochondria has its big wiggly bit in the middle, and you can see your ribosomes dotted about in similar shapes like that. But these are your kind of more complex diagrams. Next slide, these are your more simple ones. Again, these are taken from SQA past papers. These are more likely to be what you see, especially the one in the top right and the bottom left. They are very common examples because you can see the chloroplast in these, which is a really important thing. But if we look at these closely, yeah, we've got our nucleus, our cytoplasm, we've got our 2 lines around the outside of our cell wall and our cell membrane. We've got vacuole in the middle of them all, you can see nice and clearly there. But you will notice that some of them have slightly more features than others. It doesn't mean that one of these is a plant cell and one of these isn't. The important things we're looking for, they all have a vacuole, they all have a cell wall. You can see that the top left and the bottom right, they don't contain your chloroplast. Doesn't mean they're not a plant cell. They might just not be visible. It might be from a non-green part of the plant cell, which links to what we've just discussed. So really important that you know all of these are plant cells. Key things you're kind of looking for is that cell wall and that cell membrane and the vacuole. They're really the big giveaways when it's coming down to a plant cell. And again, under a microscope, looks a bit like this. You can see that nice green colour. Those darker green circles, they are your chloroplasts. They are the kind of giveaway that this is from a green section in a plant. But again, you can see most of the features there.
Okay, so just looking at as a comparison, directly animal cell versus plant cell, these are structures you need to know which is found in which. You might get a table from the SQA saying, tick the box to say whether it's found in an animal cell, a plant cell, or both. So you need to be really familiar with where it's found. So if you're doing flashcard revision, things like that, it would be a good idea to add on to your flashcards for your functions. So say you've got nucleus on one side, on the other side controls the cell, you want found in animal and plant cells. Okay, because you have to be able to state where these are located as well as what their job could be. The SQA could ask you either of those questions. Okay.
So here's a table just showing that. Similar, this might be one that appears in your exam. If it helps, there are 5 things in animal cells. There are 8 things in plant cells. All the 5 things in an animal cell are in a plant cell. There's nothing different between them in terms of those 5. It is only the 3 extra that appear in plant cells. So if you can learn the 5 in the animal cell, you've got 5 in your plant cell sorted. It's just those 3 more. But this is a nice wee comparison, just showing you what ones are in both, what ones are only in plant cells and not in animal cells.
Okay, so there we've just looked at the different features found in animal and plant cells. The next video is 2 more cells. So the next video is going to be entirely new stuff. We're going to be having a look at fungal and bacterial cells, whereas animal and plant cells should be a bit familiar from S1 and 2 anyway. But let's look at the next video. Section 3 is fungal and bacterial cells.